Hello, and welcome to Emerald Thoth with me, Mark. Right in the woods today with a very different scene from yesterday. If you saw yesterday's reading, we were in the downpour, in the drenching. Today we're in the sun, we're in a tree, or you're in a tree watching me, as it were. A little hornet comes by. This camera may shake a little bit because this branch is not the sturdiest, even though it's on kind of like an oak tree. But today I wanted to talk about something a little different, sort of a Sunday sermon, if you will, although I didn't think I'd be doing Sunday sermons on this channel. And so I need to talk about ego, one of my favourite subjects to talk about, not one of my favourite things, and to talk about ego dissolution here. Let me see if I can straighten this camera up a little bit. So ego dissolution, I believe, is one of the most important things that is on this earth right now, and has not nearly enough focus, and kind of will explain the reasons I believe why in this video. But it's interesting to me because I think it is a widespread message of ascension. Just before this video, on my foot, I'm often barefoot in the grass, there was a little grasshopper, cricket, similar kind of being, but let's say like a grasshopper because most people can identify with that. And I did a video a few days ago, maybe last week or so, about, well, he was talking about ascending and talking about your path right now, and I think it was talking about partnerships as well. But there was a grasshopper in that reading, and that grasshopper came to kind of give me a message of ascension. And okay, apologies for the interruption there. Just had to change perspective, and maybe that's what the focus is here, on changing perspective on how we see ego. I'm a little bit more in a light and shade kind of environment now to kind of steady the camera. Maybe that's a message of integrating that shadow and light. And that's when I'm talking about grasshoppers. They give me a sense of ascension because grasshoppers raise to a great height. They're small beings, but they can leap quite high, and it talks to us about a message of ascension. It also talks about, in ancient Egypt, there was a plague of locusts that were sent to give Pharaoh a warning about setting the what we would call the Jewish people now free, but the people of Moses free, which he wasn't doing. And so locusts were sent, and they kind of devoured all of the crops and everything that was there. And that's a kind of metaphor for ego as well, to saying that if human beings don't learn their ways, it's like the Great Flood, or like this cataclysm I've talked about, that without ascending beyond the ego, or the excessive amount of ego that we have, then we are in trouble as a species and on this planet. And so today I wanted to talk about excessive ego. If you're somebody who's drawn to this channel, you will probably wrestle with it. You will probably somebody who's isolated a lot, and there is a reason why. It may not be a reason that's always talked about or discussed, but there is a lot of it due to excessive ego on this earthly plane at the moment. Let's see if this will hold a bit more. And so that talks to really the fact that at this moment in time, there is an excessive amount of ego on this earth. There is a lot of shadow, there is a lot of materialism. And that can give us an imbalanced perspective. And it's because excessive ego doesn't want to die, it doesn't want to change, especially internal change. The biggest fear of human beings, and especially Western modern human beings, is internal change. There are a million ways to not change internally. There are a million masks to create. There are a million external changes to make, but not to face the internal, because internal change and connection with heart and soul cause the ego to dissolve, and that is the key thing for any ascension, for any saving of this earth, really, to prevent cataclysm. Books like Ryan Halliday, who talks about ego is the enemy, talks to Stoic kind of philosophies, and any kind of philosophy or spiritualism. We'll talk to this Eckhart Tolle in his teachings, talks about excessive ego and the pain body of excessive ego. Now this isn't to say, and I wanted to categorically say, it's not talking about no ego at all, because that would be spiritual bypassing. Because every being, even angelic beings, have ego. Ego is essentially separation, and it gives each individual thing an identity, and it gives us labels and understanding. Healthy ego is healthy. If we had no ego at all, we would struggle to manifest, or we would struggle to exist at all in any form, because the only kind of being that we know is the creator that has no ego, because the creator is everything that is. Everything that we know, and the desire of the soul, I've said a number of times, is to return to source consciousness. And so for us, that is really what we were desiring. And there may be creators within creators that we don't know about at higher levels, and then that each creator would have its own ego. But for now, I'll say that the soul wants to return to source consciousness. That is bliss. That is your natural state. That is everybody's home, everything's home. And the more we split off from that source consciousness, the more ego comes into play. So angels and starseed beings in starseed realms, alien beings, have still an ego. And so do we on Earth. But on Earth, the challenge is the material and excessive ego in this current time frame, as we call it. Obviously, time is not linear, it's more eternal. But where we are in ascension in our timeline, and timeline's a linear timeline, not in an eternal looping timeline. In the linear timeline, we're at a crux point, we're at a crossroads, because excessive ego is killing the Earth. And I'm gonna, also elaborate on that and say that is largely down to the white people, indigenous cultures, especially the Native Americans. We'll talk about the white people, the yellow people, the black people, and the red people, and each of them all has their particular ways and has connections with spirit. And the red people would say they're guardians of the Earth and the ways of Mother Earth. And they would say that the black people are related to water, which is related to creative expression. And then the yellow people are related to air, and that is related to the intellect and knowledge. And the white people will be related to fire, and that's innovation and endeavour and entrepreneurism. And if we look at it, the white people as such have used that fire destructively, used that fire to immolate. They've used it for tanks and machines to take over the earth of the red people and the black people and the yellow people. But that can no longer sustain, because it is misuse. And of all the cultures, really, the white people are the most disconnected from source consciousness. Spirituality and that understanding is rejected highly in Western cultures, and that's seen as a superiority. But of course, that superiority is ego, and excessive ego at that. And so if you're in a Western culture, which may well be the case for people who watch these videos, you may be from an Asian culture, and you'll know that naturally there's a sense of spirituality. That's not to say there's not excessive ego in Asian or African or indigenous American cultures, but there is a greater connection to source, a greater connection to tradition, and moving forward with tradition, because we can't go back in a linear time sense, but we can only move forward in a linear time sense. But there's concepts that loop all the way around that. And so what you'll find is, if you're from a Western culture and you are spiritually connected and you are spiritually called, you identify as an earth angel, a chosen one, a starseed, or just spiritually inclined, this is part of what leads to isolation. To go more in depth to what isolation is and why it occurs, is because people's egos reject you. It's not so much out of love, because that can be your family and friends who love you. It can be people who love you, colleagues who love you, the world which loves you at its core. But you can be rejected by people because you shine a light, because you have an ego dissolution. And you may not be so conscious of it yourself, but you're drawn to it. And if you're awakened, then you are more conscious of it. And so when somebody who's not ready to awaken and is more in an egoic mindset comes across somebody who is speaking and who is naturally inclined to not such an egoic mindset, or an excessive egoic mindset, again, to clarify, then they will reject it. They will use humour against it. They will deny that it's true, or they will see the mass of people who are in an ego collective construct, and this is part of the problem as well. It's a collective, excessive, egoic construct that we have in the modern world. It's not just individuals, but individuals contain a fair amount of it. And so they will reject you, and they will make you feel lesser. They will dim your light, because they're not ready to wake up. They're not ready to become as conscious, and it's because their ego says no. And they will identify with a job, title role, money, status. They'll identify with things like celebrity culture. Celebrity culture is ego being able to satiate itself, because it identifies with something outside itself, either saying this person is great or this person is bad. Both are the same side of the coin that is excessive ego, because the ego then is able to not reflect internally. It's able to distract itself through Maya. And I need to clarify something I said on the reading yesterday in a previous reading, that I said the demon king in Buddha's culture is Maya. Maya is the concept of illusion in the realm that which the demon king would come from, but the name is Mara. Buddha says, I see you, Mara, as he's being tempted, and Mara is a kind of an embodiment of Maya as such, to keep us in the world of samsara. So, Maya is the illusion concept, and the devil or the demon king or whatever you think keeps us in the matrix is illusion. Now we need a healthy dose of that. So again, I want to qualify this, because all tarot cards are equal. And so the devil card is often brought upon, and sometimes when I see readers and channelers, they go, oh, it's the devil card, oh, it's the Seven of Swords. But all of these cards do have a positive construct and a lesson. And we need to be able to understand, we need to be friends with the devil, we need to be aware of Mara and Maya. Because the Buddha doesn't try to resist or fight or denounce. And there's a caterpillar and there's a fly. A fly is like a monitoring spirit. And there's a caterpillar I see as well. And again, caterpillars and butterflies. I saw a black butterfly yesterday, after yesterday's reading, and that is a big sign of transformation and change. So if you're tuned into this channel, you're tuned into that black butterfly energy, a big change and transformation occurring. And it talks about shadow as well. Moths are often related to shadow work as well, and this the flip side of what butterflies are seen as a light kind of transformation, and a shadow transformation would be like a moth. A sort of magician and high priestess as well. And again, those tarot cards are equal. And so the devil card talks about materialism. And normally when we use the term materialism, it's given negative projections, which is odd because most people are more in a materialistic sense. But materialism is needed. When you're in an earthly form, these are the lessons you are needed to understand what it is to be in an earthly form and to enjoy it, because there are enjoyments, there are physical sensations that happen in the earthly realm that you cannot experience in higher realms in more light bodies, because it's just not the same. But that comes with heaviness, and that comes with darkness, and that comes with ego, more ego than is in higher realms, and that's the lesson that we have to learn. And that's part of the reason why there is a rejection or what word do I want to use here? Resistance to changing, because what has happened, materialism has become so much, and especially in the white world, there's so many things to have that it's so easy to stay. Those temptations of Mara, those illusions are just so much more prominent. The cravings, or the reasons to be bored, or the passions that you can get consumed in, the fire that you can get consumed in, is much more prevalent and consuming this earth. And a wildfire destroys everything. Now, the earth will regrow, the earth will rebuild, but human beings, if they are that fire, will no longer be on it. And so the good and useful thing of the devil card is to manifest things, is to work through karma, is to understand how you make things realistic, because spiritual bypassing will not make things realistic, and you cannot manifest. If you are in too much of an empathic state, you cannot manifest, because you have nothing to bring to the 3D material realm. And so, yes, you may say you are higher conscious, and you may be identifying with that, but you were put here for a reason. And that reason was not manifest. The other flip side is you may be manifesting, but you're manifesting other people's desires, because you then, again, have no sense of connection with your ego and your own shadow, and ways that you actually can help manifest. You just stay isolated. Now, the flip side is, and what most people is more a narcissistic, more malignant psychopathic state. Again, we need psychopaths and empaths to work together. But in a malignant psychopathic state, you're corruptly manifesting. You're manifesting very much in the 3D, and that's what people do in their logic all the time. They're creating things out, basically, that are too heavily in the devil energy, that are too chained, that are too bonded, that lack any kind of spiritual movement, and that causes hurt and suffering. The devil card is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is karma. Saturn talks about our karma, but it talks about karma can be good or bad. When we talk about karmic connections, we normally say it in a bad way in spiritual communities, and I kind of think we should change the connotations of it, even if the words stay the same. We should understand that karmic connections are both good karmic connections, so soulmate connections, and we say like a soulmate, like in a good way, that is a karmic connection, but it's what we consider positive karma. Both karmas are the same. You have no contrast to the light soulmate, the light eternal soulmate as such, if you don't see the dark eternal soulmate. And your eternal soulmate will have darkness in them and they will trigger your darkness. I don't believe that necessarily that all of the dark parts of us are what are in an eternal soulmate. I don't believe that. I believe that might kind of be the case in a shadow eternal soulmate or shadow twin flame. In a twin flame, as we call it, a light twin flame, as I'm going to say. They will trigger those parts of you. They will trigger that darkness, and you will trigger their darkness and try to lighten it. And that's what is talked about by Buddha and Jesus and spiritual gurus. And as we shift from the age of Pisces, we need to shift more from those individuals and into a collective awareness in the age of Aquarius, because that is the karma, the lesson we are looking to learn and ascend from, is that we need to kind of see that is within us, that those beings were saying, you're looking to clear as much karma as possible, and a crow flies by to show that's often a sign of shadow work and transformation, to try and embody a sense of higher consciousness, because we all need to embody more a sense of higher consciousness. And in a way, if you are a starseed or an angelic being, you resonate with being a higher consciousness being as such, it just means your soul's older. It just means you're more the parent, you're more the teacher. And then that role is on you to lead the way, and then others can follow. But you can't expect others to be on the same level. That again is an egoic construct, because they probably haven't been through as many lifetimes on this plane as you have, or across different dimensions and densities. So, when the Devil card comes up, it tells us about things we need to learn and things we need to focus on. And sometimes that can be material things. Sometimes the Devil card can come up to say, you're not focusing on the material things, you're not focusing on how you manifest. You know, it's as much for us in human form to know that the pentagram which goes down is talking about how you ground things, as much as the pentagram going up is how you lighten yourself. And obviously the main message is that we need to lighten and ascend, but overall we need to dissolve that ego. But if we are trying to go too far the other way and not recognize the ego in ourselves or others, it will catch us out. Our shadow will catch up with us. And the fly wants to stay with me now to say, yes, this is what the darker forces of the monitoring spirits say, and dark and light are just duality there. Source consciousness is both dark and light. So energy is energy, and everything returns to what we know as source consciousness or the creator. So, in your life, let's give it a kind of more manifest application. It means that people around you, and again, so your parents might not have an evolved soul as much as you have, or your friends might not have an as much evolved soul. And this is probably one of the issues we have when people spiritually awaken. You're being called by higher consciousness of light as such. And that is right for you, that is your path. But it does mean you start to see ego more, you start to see people suffering more, and you might try and help, and then you get frustrated because people won't listen, because their ego is denying it. And there's only so much you can do, and there's only so much people can come with you, and that's why we say if you're lifting your vibration, then people can only meet you as far as they've raised their own vibration. People can only love you as far as they've loved themselves. They can only understand you as far as they've understood themselves. And again, the ego wants to do everything to reject internal understanding and internal transformation as well. And so we're kind of faced with this task of how we dissolve our own ego sufficiently enough, not bypass it, but dissolve it sufficiently enough, how we recognize the parts that are necessary, and how we try and lead others. And the best way to lead others, as we know, is by just embodying more of a sense of this light, and trying to dissolve our egos as much as possible with giving thanks and recognition that they're there, with understanding that Saturn is necessary as much as the other planets. And so, and it makes me think, you know, the sign for Jupiter is kind of like this, right? It's not going to give it justice on that. And the sign for Saturn is like that. And they're almost the same thing, in a way, when you look at the sign for Saturn. They're pretty similar, and one's like flipped upside down. You know, Saturn comes down and then Jupiter goes upwards. But they're both kind of major signifiers in constellations. They're both quite big planets. To say that we need the contraction as much as the expansion. And there are ways for us to connect with this, and we look at it, and there's ways for us to connect with our higher consciousness selves and to have more understanding and to bring more peace to the world. It's, again, meditation is one of the most primary ways that we can dissolve ego. It's one of the most primary ways that we can connect with Source. And it's no coincidence that Buddhist temples and Buddhist monks are in mountains. I've got some mountain socks here, which I haven't got on at the moment, but this talks a lot about reaching up to God. Like, pyramids are like man-made kind of mountains. Mountains are the most natural source that we have to connection. They're nature's temples. The mountain is you. You are your own temple. We all kind of point up in a way. And that's why so many beings that go into mountains, Jesus in his transfiguration goes to Mount Sinai. Mount Shasta is the indigenous Native American people who holds many kind of mystic properties. They go into vision quests, the Native American people, to find more and to speak more to God. Reiki, if anyone who does Reiki, it's been around for thousands of years. Even Jesus learned Reiki as well, but it was lost for a long while. And modern Reiki often follows a lineage from Dr. Usui. And Dr. Usui in the mid-1800s found Reiki through going to Mount Kuriyama. I believe it was called Mount Kuriyama. And there, when he was there, and often with fasting, he then got the downloads for what Reiki is, a modern healing concept. It's common because mountains are nature's temples. They're pointing us up towards the heavens. And this is where we can have a connection with the heavens. And you are also a mountain yourself. You're a vessel yourself. And it's interesting, I talked about the Devil card, because the Devil card also relates to Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. And as we go through the zodiac signs, you start with very much the me, or the healthy embodied I am in Aries. Taurus is about your personal possessions. Gemini is about connections in a dualistic kind of nature. Cancer is about the home. And then we talk about individual, how you are in the world. Leo, your own identity. It starts to go through until you get to Scorpio. It then becomes about collective finances as part of Scorpio and the collective consciousness connections that we have. And Sagittarius is about understanding and learning and philosophy. And then you hit, I was going to say Capricorn. You hit Capricorn. And Capricorn is often related to mountains because it's the goat. It's actually the goat fish. And in the goat part, the goats climb the mountains, and it's about reaching the peak. It's about reaching a sense of status. Nordic Light, who I love, I think on her Capricorn card in her new kind of Astro Matrix deck, it has a mountain, like a climber with Capricorn. And that's, again, us reaching that height. And here's the interesting thing. People who often peak in the material world and become champions of industry, of entrepreneurism, or boxing champions. So I'll give an example. With Tyson Fury was a well-known boxer of Romani or Gypsy descent roots from the Celtic regions, from the Irish regions, was raised in Manchester, England, or around Manchester, England. And he became world champion, quite a big guy, but a very graceful big boxer, heavyweight. And he became world champion. He beat Vladimir Klitschko, who's one of the greats of, especially the millennial era, 2000s onwards. And when he beat Vladimir Klitschko, he was not favourite. Vladimir Klitschko was quite a heavy favourite, fairly quite a heavy favourite. But he won, and he became world champion. And when he wasn't expected to. And when he became world champion, he nosedived. It was 2 years until he got back into the ring. I think he faced Deontay Wilder in his first fight, who was world champion, many KOs. But when he became champion after Vladimir Klitschko, he started to slide, he started to say odd things on social media, he started to distance from his family. And anybody who's in gypsy culture, one of the good things about gypsy culture is family is really important. There's some bad things, but they also stick together. And there is also kind of a spiritual connection in those cultures as well. But I digress. When he became champion, he started to separate from his family. He started going to Las Vegas, started going to casinos, started doing drugs, heavy drugs, and was just almost out of it for 2 years, put on a load of weight. Came off social media because he couldn't be talking on there anymore with some of the things he was saying. And then he made a huge comeback. He faced Deontay Wilder in one of the greatest boxing fights in history. And he was winning that fight, and he should have won that fight. It was a draw in the end, but he should have won that fight on the cards. But what happened was, I think in the 11th round, one of the final rounds, he got knocked down by Deontay Wilder, who was one of the fiercest punchers in the history of boxing, a lethal way to KO people. And in the 11th round, the only way that Deontay Wilder could have won at that point was to knock out Tyson Fury. And Tyson Fury was on the ground for, well, it was about 8 seconds. And then when he heard the 8 count, something in him got him up. And it's interesting because his dad, John Fury, talks about when he was born, he struggled to survive when he was born, but he found the resilience to stay alive. And in this moment, in this bout, in his comeback, to go into a heavy world champion fight fairly soon after coming back. Anyway, 8-9, he got up. He got up and he saw out the fight. Now, it was called a draw in the end, probably because of that knockdown that they gave. Boxing cards are odd, but it was made a draw. But actually, Tyson Fury really won that fight, and then he won the following 2 fights he had with Deontay Wilder. But here's the point. There was something in him that got back up. And that's the lesson for us. Because he found something more. He was world champion and it wasn't enough. And he became a good advocate for mental health issues after that. He became a much more kind of reasoned celebrity figure. Now he's still a celebrity figure, and I talked earlier about us identifying with celebrities. And you could call me guilty of that now, but I'm giving a story to illustrate. Somebody at the peak, and you could take 1 million businessmen who get disillusioned and they go on medical retreats. It's interesting I said medical, spiritual retreats, which can be medical retreats, medicine people. And so we see in this world that you can reach the peak of the material world, but then you look for something else. Tyson Fury got up in that fight and found a way to get up and to still be here on this earth, even though he'd gone through all those difficulties to come back in the ring. And even when he was winning a fight, and even when he faced one of the biggest punches in the world and took a huge hit, he found a way to come back, and he was born to do that because he did that as a child. And there's a reason, there's a purpose, and so you also have a purpose. And it's a question, and that's about anybody who we see as successful, anybody who reaches the top of the material mountain. The question then is, then what? What's next? And that was an excellent point for me to pause that last video, because the timer would run on and I would start a new video anyway. So I thought I'd just kind of segue out on the camera. What next? And so I talk about Capricorn. Capricorn is the goat fish. Capricorn is one of the most maturest signs. I would say Pisces is probably the most mature because of the way it goes through the zodiac, but it's often seen as the most mature sign. And it's the longest sign because it's the goat fish. And the goat part talks about the earthly part, this world that we're in, and how we can influence it in a good way. Well, it should be a good way, it can be a bad way. But then Capricorns have to mature. Then Capricorns have to understand their own internal workings, like the subconscious, like a mermaid, essentially. It's a fish tail, but it's like a mermaid's tail when you look at it. And we then are asked, what next? What are we going to bring that is greater than ourselves and our status and our physical material achievements? And that's when the zodiac moves on to Aquarius. And Aquarius talks about collective mindset, collective responsibility, collective understanding. It asks us to come together, which is what the age of Aquarius is asking us to do in this world now. It's asking us, this is the karma. How do we all embody that sense of Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness? How do we all start to go, I see you, Mara? And I put my right hand to the ground, it's like Buddha does, sometimes we'll do this. I see you, Mara. Because that's what we're trying to see. So ego can often put a material lens on everything. And it's for us to put on a clearer lens, a more balanced lens, a more spiritual lens, if you will, but a way to see beyond the illusion, a way to see past Mara, to not be so influenced by the devil, to not be succumb by the devil and by ego. If anybody who watches Rick and Morty, there's an interesting episode. Shout out to Rick and Morty, and any fans out there will know what I mean, but there's a number of movies that have this same kind of concept. They go to a world where they're these basically parasitic creatures. They're like kind of octopusy creatures, and octopuses are great, so I don't want to associate that, but they kind of, these parasites go on people's heads. And there's something like that in Futurama as well. I'm sure the Simpsons have something like that. But even in films, parasite kind of takes over. You might like Stranger Things, the mind flayer. Basically takes over people's consciousness. And our collective consciousness now is quite dark. And this is quite egoic. And this is something that needs to be cleared. And lightworkers are the way to clear it. The chosen ones as such are the way to clear it. By leading in light, by embodying it themselves, for people to then move towards it. Anyway, in this example, they're taken over, and in this kind of hive construct, and the parasites take over. And it's almost a metaphor for our ego right now, is that we're being taken over by our ego. We've been taken over by devilish constructs, by Maya, illusion, through Mara, the demon king. The concepts are all throughout. You know, I talked about Buddha, and he kind of, when he enlightens, he transcends that, and he says, I see you, Mara, and then he reaches enlightenment. Jesus goes in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights where the devil tries to tempt him. There's always a kind of test, there's always a karma to clear. And so as we go to Aquarius, in the age of Aquarius, it's asking us to understand that. And so comes in information about, it's also about aliens. It's also, we hit the mountain, and then we hit the mountain, we reach the stars. Aquarius is the star card. And it's no coincidence, you'll see in the star card is the ibis. There's stars in the sky, there's the water bearer, and there's an ibis, which relates to Thoth. And that's us coming into an ancient knowledge and understanding, a higher knowledge and understanding, a starseed kind of understanding, or angelic understanding, whichever realms you want to go, a little bit beyond the human. And it's interesting because sometimes Aquarius gets mixed up for a water sign because it's the water bearer. And in the star card, there's a naked woman. And then that shows the kind of vulnerability of it. And there's the starseed, and when you remove ego identity, you become more vulnerable, but then you become more empowered with spirit. It's a nice little flip. But the water bearer is saying for us to awaken, and it's for us to understand our unconscious more. It's to go more internally and balance that with our external. Because again, the ego, we don't remove the external, but we balance the internal with the external. We awaken. And then finally we get to Pisces, and Pisces is the eternal I am. It's the big I am. It's the, you know, the big I am, but the wider I am. It's the cosmos, and it is going back to source consciousness. And Pisces is like that duality of yin and yang. It's us embodying the masculine and the feminine, the light, the dark. It's becoming as divinely embodied conscious beings as we can. It's the psychopath and the empath together. It's the leader and the follower, and mixed in between. It's the creative and the structured, the masculine and the feminine again. Like it's a divine balance. You know, when Gemini is talking more about a human kind of balance, the Pisces is talking more about this kind of divine conscious balance. And so the cycle will start again. And it's all moves through 1 to 12 again, as we know it. I believe there's a 13th zodiac sign, there's Asclepius and the snake and the healer. Maybe that talks to something about ancient knowledge as well, but let's just go with what's known at the moment. And it's not really relevant, all the definition, all the ego. It's relevant what it means to us. And it's relevant what mission we take up on this earth. And it's relevant for us to speak to each other like this and to understand that you're doing something transformative. Like that black butterfly, like the grasshopper leaping up. You're transforming, you're leaping, you're ascending. And it's what's needed. And what that means is dissolving of the ego. Because excessive ego, too much devil energy, too much of any one thing is going to keep you stuck. It's going to stop you being able to manifest. And it's going to stop you being able to lead the way. And that's what you were embodied on this earth to do. And that's why sometimes people call it Earth School, because it's to learn these lessons. And it's because the benefits of this material realm, which are having things and physically feeling them, it also means it's a heavy identity. It also means you can be more, you're more in the realms of Mara, you're more in the realms of Maya and illusion, you're more in the realms of the devil. But you're here to see that that's okay. I see you, Mara. I see you, devil. I see it. I see materialism. I recognize my need for it, but not my necessity for it. And I realise my connection to source as well. And I realise that not everyone else is there, and that's okay. But know that isolation is for a reason, like Jesus in the desert, like Master Ashui going up to Mount Kuriyama. These are all for reasons, and it's just what we call a higher purpose, but it's how we see it on earth now. And that rejection is other people being afraid. It's often fear. It's often fear of internal change. And so when we kind of cut the cords, we still also have to learn to have compassion. And an Aquarian age means connection with everyone, and that includes the whole collective. And it just means you're meant to lead the way more. And that means you're meant to lead your parents more, which is hard for us to understand as egoic human beings. You know, we don't start off that way, and we have to learn that. And sometimes that gets twisted and tormented along the way. Sometimes that gets corrupted along the way, and we have to try and remove that corruption from ourselves in an individual lifetime, as well as many lifetimes. And if we can come back embodied as an empath, as a beneficial psychopath, as somebody who's embodied enough in a divine union to understand that we can have compassion and forgiveness for those people, but also distance. Our ego working with our heart and soul, and our body having all of that within us, channeled through spirit, then we can start to kind of lead the way. And then people will come. It's a back and forth. It's not going to happen overnight and just like that in one way. But we can start to embody more that consciousness, start to bring more in people who will help us understand that as we loosen the ties. We have to be careful of just cutting everyone off, because that's not being fully embodied. You might be more embodied in a higher consciousness, but that's not being fully embodied, because the devil also has you separated from people who still love and care about you. But it's a tough task for us to try and embody that higher consciousness and to try and work with others and try and feel that compassion for friends and family. And it does take an element of separation before we can kind of come back. And we don't know what happened to Jesus so much after he became enlightened. To the resurrection is seen as the end point by the church, which isn't correct. It's often seen he created a family of Mary Magdalene. That seems the most likely thing that happened. So he was still probably in ways influencing the world, maybe just not so prominent. And Buddha was still, when Buddha became enlightened, was still here for another 35 years or so. He became enlightened around 35, give or take. But basically his first, and it talks to us, we have a first half of life, and then we have a second half of life, and then we have another life after that generally. So we're going through these cycles, but in a one lifetime we always have this one where we're awakening, and as much as we're probably going to awaken at the age of 35, then we awaken, and then we're as embodied as we can to try and help others. It's not so linear as that, but I think as James Hollis, he writes books and he talks about the first half of life and the second half of life. And so it's on us to, as we embody that, wherever we are on the journey, forget the numbers and the ages, wherever we are, to take that forward and to understand our role in ego dissolution. And understand that because we do that, we can't expect others to be on the same level, and we can't expect the world to see it, because the world is still rejecting it. The forces that be, the economic structures, the media structures, the main are still in an imbalanced Capricorn kind of energy, as Pluto moves into Aquarius as well. Is that kind of, we're starting to see more that those figures aren't healthy, they aren't mentally right, and the people that we say are mentally ill actually probably have a higher connection to Source. In Renaissance times, people we would consider mad now and be institutionalized would walk the streets, and people would understand that they have some connection with Source, even if they didn't understand it themselves. It's just a respect for it. And so we're here to kind of show that we can embody that in a really material world, and we can lead the way, especially on the Western front, because the Western front is where the biggest change is where the biggest room for improvement is where we can take that technology, take that fiery energy and use it in a higher consciousness way. If this channel has landed on you, if this video has landed on you, it's come through Source. Source works through YouTube and your Alexa and through your computers. It brings you things if you're tuned into it. Even if you're not tuned into it, it's still bringing you things. But the ultimate algorithm is Source consciousness, is the creator. And so we're looking to try and connect as much as we can, and we're trying to help others and lead the way. And so you're not alone. There are people out there like you, like me, like us. And we are just those stars who have been born with this connection, actually. We've given an advantage in a way, even though materially it seems like a disadvantage, to try and lead and help others. And we almost alone have to learn to embody that, but then together we can learn to embody that and share that as an Aquarian age with others. So thank you for being here. Thank you for going through that. I was almost going to say sorry for you guys. No, I'm not sorry for you going through that, because you were destined to, and because you are a stronger human being for it. And the fly seems to return to kind of almost say, yeah, this is true. I see you, Mara. Because they know. The darker forces in the higher consciousness way, they still know. And so you are doing work that is important. It's just not materially obvious at the moment. And there are others who are doing it, and there are others who will connect with you, and you will create such meaningful connections with those people, and such a meaningful connection with yourself. And that starts with the connection with yourself and the connection with source consciousness. And if we can bring a flow through that, if we can ascend to what we call 4D and 5D realms, then this earth can move forward in a real evolution. What is true evolution, not the type that is thrown about in an egoic construct, in an excessive egoic construct, because really it's survival of the species, it is not survival of the fittest. That was misconstrued from Darwin. And the understanding of the psyche and the subconscious has been used for things like marketing in the modern world. It's not been used how Freud meant it. And principles of quantum physics and mechanics like Einstein started to come across and started to be used for the atomic bomb. We need to see the illusion. We need to see Mara and say, I see you, but it's okay. And so, I love you unconditionally. I believe in you so much, and I'm here for you. I may not physically be there with you, but there are realms that we are together, and there are as a collective consciousness where we connect and where we can help lead the way. And so, I appreciate you. Eke, Ase, Namaste. Thank you.